right. Hello,
All right.
everyone.
Hi,
Hello.
how you doing?
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Olia Gavrish. I am PM on .NET team at Microsoft working on desktop. And I have Dmitry Lalin with me. Dmitry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Dimitri Lylan, and I'm the PM for XAML tooling. So I'm excited to once again talk to you all today.
Yay! And today is the first time we're doing this community stand up, not in Channel 9 studio, but at home. That's the first time I'm streaming. I have some craziness with two laptops and lots of wires going on here, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll manage. Right.
Yeah.
And
What can
today,
go wrong?
yeah, ha, I know there is a button that I'm not supposed to press because it
Yeah,
will
don't
end
press the button.
everything. So today we will talk about WinForms, XAML, WPF, open source, what's coming in .NET 5, accessibility, and other things. So if you're curious, keep with us, stay with us. And I think I can start with update from WinForms, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes. So what's happening in WinForms? Let me start sharing my screen. Because one thing you guys are asking us a lot is designer. And I wanted to give you the update on the designer. As you know, last week we released a new version of Visual Studio Preview. It's 16.6 Preview 3. And in this version, we have a new version of WinForms Designer. And today I will show you even later version. I'm running internal preview, so it's a little bit ahead, but you can go ahead and get the latest version of 16.6 Preview 3, and you will see most of the things that I will show you already available for you. And as you can see here in the toolbox, we have lots of new controls. So we have all the dialogues, picture box, print dialog, open file dialog. And let me actually start adding that on this form so you can see that it's actually working. Let me add tab control. So here you can see we have designer actions working as well. You can modify, drag around the controls. You can work with properties. Add something like text box and make it multi-line. And now I will actually type something here. Yay! Hello, community stand up. So, yes, it's coming along.
Yes, people said in the chat that they can't see your toolbox, and I can confirm that
Oh
for some
no.
reason your toolbox is slightly cut off on the left
Oh,
side.
okay. Thanks for telling me. Okay, let me do that. It's probably OBS cutting it in some interesting way, but I think now you can see it, right? All
Yeah,
right.
it should be better.
Thanks. Thanks for the
Yeah.
comment. Yep. So, lots of new controls. And what's even more exciting is that we are going to release another version in a month. In the late May, we will have the 16.6 GA and 16.7 Preview 1. And this should be more or less mature version for WinForms Designer. So we hope that with that version, you can be successful porting your apps to .NET Core and working with WinForms Designer. And what's going to happen next? Next, we will work closely with our Entity Framework core team, and enable all data scenarios for WinForms. You will see some already in the May version, but the complete, like full experience will come later. And we also already working with all the control vendors such as DevExpress, Telerik Progress, Grape City, Infragistics, ActivePro, Syncfusion, and so on. And we're making sure their controls are supported on .NET Core and in future on .NET 5. So all your favorite third-party controls will be there. And we also have some news regarding .NET 5 for WinForms, because most of our resources are concentrated around the designer, but we also do some work for .NET 5. And one amazing news I wanted to share with you. Let me go ahead and show this tweet. This is a tweet from my teammate Igor Vilikorosov, and he was super excited because we finally merged a new feature into WinForms. This new feature.
Yay!
Yay!
15 years in the making.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was exactly 15 years, but it was a long time because we were adding some controls, but it's been a really long time since then. And yes, we received something new for WinForms. It's task dialog. Dmitry, have you heard about task dialog?
Yeah, it's sounds very familiar. And then I did take a look at this PR, and it was very descriptive, so it's easy to get what's new there.
Yeah. So it's advanced and super customizable version of message box. You can think of it like that, or like my teammate likes to say, it's a message box on steroids. So you can do amazing stuff like that, like you can see on the GIF right now, or you can add your custom buttons and name them.
Yeah, very customizable. Reminds me of XAML.
Right. Yep, you can have elevation, you can even have the progress bar and multi-pages and so on. So this OPR was done by open source contributor Konstantin Preiser, and we can't thank him enough for doing this amazing job. It's like really impressive what he did. He committed lots and lots of lines of code. He participated in our reviews. He addressed all the commands. So he did amazing job. And thank you so much. Yeah, Konstantin Preiser. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Yes,
we had a question in the chat if this was going to come to the .NET Framework version of WinForms, and my understanding is it will not, right? This is only if you have core.
Yes, exactly. It won't come to .NET Framework because we stopped .NET Framework where it is. We cannot add any more updates to .NET Framework because we don't want to break existing users, and that's why we are moving toward .NET Core and .NET 5. So that will be in .NET 5.
Yeah, it makes sense. .NET 5 is where we plan to innovate, and folks should hopefully have a clear path to get there. And if you are having trouble moving your .NET framework application forward, please let us know why. We'd love to try to understand and try to help.
Yeah, totally. Besides that, we have some feature requests. So if you go to WinForms repository on the GitHub and search for API approved, you can see all the feature requests that we approved for .NET 5. And you can see list view group will receive some updates. We will add task dialog, subtitles, and footers for list view group. We will do some improvements for track bar. Actually, I have it open. So for track bar, we had a suggestion to add selection start and selection end. So you can set them, and it will influence what you see on the UI. We have a few more. So all those features we're hoping to add in .NET 5. And as you can see here, there is another tag up for grabs. That means that this feature, if you would like to be a contributor into WinForms, you can go ahead, pick up this task, implement it yourself, and actually make the future of WinForms. Then we'll be extremely thankful. We'll invite you to our API reviews. We will work with you to help you with any questions you have, but you will be the owner and contributor of this feature to WinForms. And let me stop sharing my screen and go back.
All right, so we had a few questions come in chat. We had a question about Linux support. Just to be clear on sort of the Linux support, .NET Core supports Linux. So if you build a particular workload that is supported on top of .NET Core, for example, ASP.NET, you can deploy it to a Linux-based environment. You can do, I think, like console applications, if I'm not lying there. But basically, there's a certain type of apps that we support. WPF and WinForms are not supported though on Linux or Mac. So you can only run them on Windows as workloads. So those frameworks that sit on top of .NET Core are not ported to Linux, if that makes sense. I hope that answers that question. And then there was I guess a good point. You can ask us a question that we ask you back, right? It's a fair thing to say, which is, so why hasn't Visual Studio moved to .NET Core? Visual Studio is very complicated, and we have all sorts of our own sort of considerations, just like many of our customers have various considerations. I'm definitely not trying to imply that .NET Core is magically enabled for every single type of application. If you have something that's very complicated, that has lots of different kinds of technologies, has 15 years of history and lots of technical complexity, you might have trouble going to .NET Core. We want to hear about it because we want to understand customer scenarios. We understand our scenario, and we think in some ways we have some unique considerations, but we're learning from ourselves. We'll hope to learn from you as well. So that's how I hope to answer that.
Yep. I see there is another question, like I think a person meant it as rhetorical question. Why do we need WinForms if we have WPF and UWP? Well, that's really up for you guys to choose which one would you like to use. And these technologies, these platforms are slightly different, and they all have their benefits, and WinForms provides an extremely easy getting started experience, and drag and drop, what you see is what you get. Very comfortable experience with the designer for .NET Framework, and .NET Core Designer will be there. We are getting close. I already see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, so it's really find the right tool for the job. If WPF works best for you, totally. But there we hear many customer stories where WinForms is actually better, and they're very happy with this platform. And that's why we heard back a few years ago that, like, don't kill it. Please make sure there is a future for WinForms as well, because that's technology we have all our projects running on, and we want the future for our projects. And now we have it, right? We made it open source, we ported it to Core and .NET 5, and we are receiving new features like task dialog. So
yeah, definitely lots of investment going on there. Just to address another comment in the chat, that the link isn't working. As far as I know, that link to the URL is .com/ the specific URL that we have for our links today. I started an in private browser session. I opened that URL, and then I opened every single link in there, and they should work. If it's still not working, I'll try to look some more afterwards, but do let us know. We hope all the resources we're showing you are easily available under that URL, so give it a shot.
Yes. Another question, I think I already covered it, but just to confirm, WinForms in .NET 5 will or will not ever be in Linux? No, it won't be on Linux. WinForms will remain Windows only, because we have a very high dependency on Windows API, so it will always be Windows.
Yep. All right. So with that, I would like to show folks some things in the WPF, not just WPF, UWP, basically the XAML tooling world, and talk about some of the new features that we've been working on, things that are available today in 16.5, things that are available in 16.6 preview, and also talk a little bit about 16.7 where I can. So with that, I'm going to share my screen so I can show folks what I'm talking about.
Go ahead.
Just a little bit. All right, so hopefully my screen is showing up for everybody. All right, there we go. Yeah, for some reason, in the window earlier, just so you know, since it's the first time we're doing this, like the meeting chat is slightly like pushing the screen out. Like I see meeting chat on the right. So that's just weird. I don't know if there's anything you can do on your side to make it go away, but if not, I will do what you did.
I will work on that, but meanwhile, please move everything.
Yeah, no worries. I'll move my window slightly more to the right, just so it's easier to see. All right, so with this, I want to talk about release notes. It's a really important way for us to communicate with you exactly what's going on in terms of what we're releasing every single release. And We do this for WinForms, WPF, and everything else that ships as part of Visual Studio. So if you just never look at release notes, I highly recommend go take a look at that. It's in the links that we're sharing as part of this session, and it's pretty easy to find. If you go to Google or Bing and type Visual Studio release notes, you'll go there. I want to point out that release notes have a current branch and have a preview branch version of them. And the current branch means the current release, which is 16.5. So 16.5 is the release that if you currently have like the latest production release installed, that's what you have installed on your machine. And in that release, we shipped a couple of new features inside of Visual Studio for you for either UWP or WPF developers. And these are the 3 features that we have shipped. And I wanted just to mention them. The very first one was a really popular community request that we finally got done. I talked about it before, so it's not super new, but lots of people I still find don't know about it, which is dragging an image into the XAML code editor finally generates XAML that's the actual image tag with the right URL to the image, internal project reference URL. So here I'm going to demonstrate that. So in Visual Studio, I today do not have an image of a big picture of my face, and if I take it from Solution Explorer and I drag it in, it will actually create the image, and it'll have the source set to the right image path. So just wanted to point that out. This used to generate a disk path, like literally without the image tag when you used to do this drag operation, and that was really not ideal. Customers wanted it fixed. We fixed it. Another thing that people wanted to do was the ability to change the artboard colors. So if we go to Tools, Options, and we go under Environment, then we go under Fonts and Colors, and then we, from this dropdown, select XAML Designer. Settings, these settings have so many things in them, even I sometimes forget where things are. But if you do all of that, you'll find we now have artboard background, which lets you change the colors. So if I wanted to change the background to be white checkered, I can do that right there. And then if I was like, oh my God, that's horrible, I can go back and I can say use defaults and bring it back to the theme color. But basically, we're giving you more control. Hopefully, this is making it better for some folks that wanted a different color. If it's still not doing what you wanted it to do, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback. Let us know if something isn't right. All right, so those were a couple of things there. We also changed made an improvement for the XAML Designer, which wasn't working for projects that were configured with .NET Core as a published single file scenario. So that is now supported, but it'll degrade performance of the designer a little bit. So just know that your designer might be a little bit slower, but it will load now in that scenario. And please let us know if you're seeing something crazy. And I always like to point this out. So I'm going to stop my demo for a second and talk about generically Visual Studio. When I say send us feedback, there's many ways you can do that today, right? You can find me on social media. You can write into chat right now something that you want us to look at. But really the best way to get us feedback is always this button right here in the top right of Visual Studio, the send feedback button. Send feedback button in VS is the thing that routes directly to me and my team. We triage all the tickets. You can have a suggestion. You can have a bug. When you press that button, we understand a little bit more about the version of Visual Studio you're using, the version of .NET Core, or .NET Framework you're targeting. So we get a little bit of telemetry about your kind of general setup of your application, but we don't get a copy of your project. So your code is safe with you. And if we need help, we'll reach out to you and ask you for maybe more reproduction type scenario information. But please use that button. We truly look at this every single day as feedback comes in, and it's really the main way that we can address feedback in an organized fashion and understand how folks are doing. So please keep that feedback coming. So with that, I'm going to go on to some more features and talk about preview features. So if you look at the preview release notes, which I have open here, we've been shipping something in every single preview release. So I'm going to go back through time, starting with preview 1. And talk about what we did in preview 1. So preview 1 of 16.6, we added a brand new setting for hot reload scenarios. This is something that people that use hot reload. So what is XAML hot reload? It's you have the app running and you're changing the XAML in the file, and the XAML is reflecting immediately those changes in your running application. So it's a real-time editing feature while your app is running, letting you change XAML. There was a couple of scenarios where people were having trouble with this feature because they needed to change multiple different files at the same time. Multiple different things within a file at the same time before it became valid XAML. So for example, if you needed to change both the inline XAML and as part of a resource in the page of XAML, you couldn't make those changes immediately. You had to make one, make the other, and sometimes it would break your running application. So now we added a setting that it only executes the applied changes when you hit save on the file that you're editing, because without this setting, it's happening in real time as you're actually typing. As soon as you have valid like XAML within the line that you're on, we apply the change, and this works most of the time for most people in most scenarios. But there were some people that were hitting this problem, so we gave them a setting to make it easier. We're also actively working on trying to make the designer a better experience for editing XAML. So one of the things that we're previewing is something called suggested actions. We've had this as a preview feature since like 16.5, I believe, is the first time we shipped it. So it continues to be a preview only feature. You won't find it in the release version of Visual Studio until we truly are done. And there's so many things changing in this feature. It's still therefore a preview, but it's a feature that's really powerful. Today it works for WPF and UWP controls, the ones that are listed here. So inbox controls only today. It will be extendable for partners eventually. We're working on that story that will allow partners to actually add settings for their controls in here too. And the idea behind suggested actions is in line with the designer. When you click on a control, you'll be able to expand the view, which will have all sorts of things that we know that are very, very common to your application. So for text blocks, it's really common to change things like background brush, the name. For image control, you might want to set the source properties. So these things are really common actions that you might want to take against the control. And we are working to expand this to include more properties and more actions to actually like add a new tab to a tab control or do other multi-step operations. So we're trying to bring them to be super accessible to you as a developer. Let me show you an example here. So I have a button in my application. If I click on the button, assuming screen sharing didn't break anything here. 1 second. Let me put this back. As always, demos. Let me reopen that up. Sorry, this is just my local machine craziness. There you go. So here I have a button. I'm going to drag it, which is definitely not something I would do in the real world application, but like I'm dragging it just so you can see it here clearer. And I'm going to click on this adorner, and based on clicking in the adorner, it shows me all the common properties that we know through telemetry people change the most in terms of these controls. So it's based on real data, and we're trying to make these things accessible to you. You can come in here and you can use a color picker to change the text color. You can go in and you can add a name of the control. Button 1 in this case. We might want to not make it enabled by default. We might want to change the content of the button to say start instead of be the default button text. So all of these things, yes, you can do them in XAML. Yes, you can do them in Property Inspector, but we know that this is super useful to make it accessible to folks. So that's a feature we're excited about as well. Next, if we start going up our previews, if we go to preview 2 of 16.6, in preview 2, we shipped only one new thing, which was toolbox support for NuGet packages with multiple Visual Studio manifest files. So this is more for extensibility improvements. So I just wanted to point it out. It's not something I'm going to demo, but if you are a vendor that's working on working against our extensibility endpoints, this is something you should check out. We put release notes that both are sort of like regular customer facing features, but also when we change extensibility, we put it in release notes to make sure folks know things are changing. All right, so next I'm going to talk about preview 3, which was the last preview we did, and what are the new features here. So there's the Azure Key Vault in the packaging wizard integration. This is really great for UWP developers that want to start putting their certificates directly in Azure Key Vault and then using them as part of the packaging wizard flow. I don't have a demo for this, but I've seen a demo. It works great. If this is a scenario you care about, it's here for you, and please give us feedback if it's working well. We also have 2 other features. One of them is something that Ole is going to talk about in detail a little bit later, so I'm going to skip this for now. But we are trying to make the new designer that we have for .NET Core available to framework developers, and Ole will tell you all about it. So I'm going to talk about the last feature here, which is another improvement to XAML hot reload and live visual tree. One of the things we heard from customers were that there were valid scenarios where people would F5 into debugging more than one XAML application as part of the solution. So they have a solution, the solution has multiple projects, and they want the tools, the hot reload tools, the live visual tree to work against that configuration. Another example is if you have a UWP app that has multi-instance support. So you can launch more than one instance of the same app over and over. So all of these scenarios were basically not working with the hot reload and live visual tree tooling. What would happen is you would start the second instance of your UWP app, or you would launch multiple WPF apps, for example, and your app would attach the Visual Studio would attach to the very first thing that started, basically. So as a race conditions, whatever won the race, that's where we attached, and you had no easy way to attach to the other applications, sort of as a well-defined UX inside of our experience. So now we just attach to everything that's starting as part of your debug session. And I can demonstrate that pretty easily here. I have two WPF applications, nothing special about it, really simple stuff. So I'm going to go to my solution. I'm going to click Set Startup Project. And I'm going to set multi startup projects, and I'm going to say start for both of them. So they both start when I hit F5. I'm going to hit F5. I'm going to start running the application. And now I have two WPF apps that are starting on a different screen here. So I'll drag them over just to show you. Here they are. And what would happen before is only one of these applications would get the in-app toolbar, the one that allows you to do things such as select the control in the XAML and select it in the live visual tree. And right now you'll see that it's working because we have actually two applications that are attached. I'm going to drag VS in case we're still having that issue where we're cut off. And I'm just going to drag it slightly over here. So here it is. We're attaching to process number one, process number two. We give you the process ID, the file name of the executable, and then we give you the live visual tree below it. And because it's all kind of the same architecture, by enabling this, we've enabled hot reload. So it doesn't matter which XAML you change for which app, it'll update, and all the tooling of this in-app toolbar that appears on the top of your app will work as well. So that's something that we've enabled for developers in this preview release. So lots of features in 16.6. Please help us test them. I'll close this feature segment by talking about something that's coming to 16.7. So this is kind of the first time I'm talking about it publicly as far as I can remember. In terms of like saying when this is actually coming to Visual Studio. And when I say coming, of course, things are subject to change. We're making a best effort to make it happen. But our hope is that 16.7 Preview 1, the next version of Visual Studio basically that's coming, will include this XAML binding improvements page. And it's available today as an extension. If you install the extension, when you have binding failures, the binding failures will be still shown in the output window the way they normally are today, but will also appear in this much more optimized, searchable, sortable window that allows you to sort of have a lot more control over seeing your bindings fail. And this is a feature that I'm really excited about, and it's coming in 16.7 Preview 1. Fingers crossed. Hopefully they will make it. And we're excited to announce that that's the first feature that I can talk about for the future. So that concludes my list of features.
That was a very impressive list of features, Dmitry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And somebody said in the chat they need this extension. It's public. You can go grab it. Just search for XAML binding debug output. Install it, tell us what you think, and hopefully you'll see it pretty soon in Visual Studio.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. And now I think I can talk to new XAML WPF Designer for .NET Framework projects, right? So
exciting.
Right now, we're working on consolidating resources around a single code base. And as you probably know, at present, we have two different code bases for our XAML designers. One is the old one for .NET Framework projects, and we have a new one for .NET Core that is based on isolation surface architecture. And what does it mean? That means that the designer surface runs outside of Visual Studio process. And that is a new architecture we came up with a few years ago for XAML, and it's improved. It's much better. And now we're trying to bring all that goodness to .NET Framework projects as well. So what we are intending to do, we are intending to switch the designer to the new extensibility model, and so that it will be identical to our .NET Core designer. And that will give .NET Framework projects support for 64-bit configuration. It will give better startup performance, improved stability, and all the new features. And there is one new feature already available. It's called suggested actions that you can see in preview, and many more to come. So if you're a developer not using extensibility of Visual Studio, it probably won't affect you much, but you'll get all the benefits. But if you are developing third-party controls, if you're a control vendor, if you're using extensibility of Visual Studio in any way, you will have to update your code to interact with the new extensibility model. Good news is that if you already made that update for .NET Core projects, now you can just reuse that code, and we believe that it will be almost like 100% reusable. So now you don't have to have two code bases either. You can just use the .NET Core approach, and it will be easy to maintain only one source. And this preview is already available in Visual Studio starting from 16.5. Let me share my screen and show you how you can enable it. So in Visual Studio, you can go to Tools, Options. Here in Environment, Preview Features, you can see new WPF XAML Designer for .NET Framework. And you can click that. Then you will need to restart your Visual Studio, and you will be running the new designer for .NET Framework applications. So go ahead, test it, let us know what you think. At this moment, we are working with control vendors to make sure their controls work well with the new designer. So we will wait till all of them are fully supporting the new model, and only then we will probably make the switch. Until then, it will be available in the preview, but the main version will be the old version to make sure we don't break any of control vendors. And yeah, I think now we can move and talk about our community news, right?
Yeah, there's the question in the chat that I wanted to address and also say thank you for liking my background. This is something that Microsoft Teams actually brought in for us. This is not something I selected like on my own. Like I didn't find this picture, but I selected it from a list of pictures available. So if you use Microsoft Teams, hopefully at some point you'll have this feature too. It's really awesome. But to address the comment in the chat that was asking about the future of like how people should think about which framework to select. Should they choose WPF or WinForms for future projects, or is this discouraged? WPF and WinForms are projects that we are actively, working on. We brought .NET Core to them. We're moving them from Core 3 to Core 5. With WinForms, already just showed a bunch of improvements in the tooling. We're making lots of improvements for WPF developers, and it's something that we continue to understand that this is where a lot of customers are, and there's some kind of technical considerations that would make a customer want to choose WPF or WinForms, and it's perfectly legitimate to do that even today. So I would not tell anybody as a default, like this is the way you should build for Windows when you're building your desktop applications. It's a much more convoluted conversation, right?
Absolutely.
So basically make a decision that's right for you today and go build an app. That's always my recommendation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Okay, do we have any more questions?
I think we're good. So community news. I will start. I have one thing to talk about from the community perspective. So let me share my screen real quick here. So from the community perspective, I wanted to point out a new video that was put out by the App Consult team. The App Consult team is a Microsoft team that consults with customers on various, things they're trying to improve about their projects. So if a customer, for example, is somebody that has support contacts of Microsoft, and they're having some kind of trouble moving their app forward or optimizing some part of their application and some of the newer technologies. These folks are great resources, and they're also really active people in the community. They're on Twitter, they make videos, they go to events, and they speak at events. So I've run into a lot of the people on this slide, Mike, Sebastian, and Matteo, have all been really great partners to the product team in that sense. And they just put together a video that came out in April this month. And the video talks three topics. It's about taking your existing applications and modernizing certain aspects of those applications. We have Mike talks about modernizing user interfaces. We have Sebastian that talks about improvements that are coming in WinUI 3, and we also have Matteo that talks about the DevOps experience. So it's a video I highly recommend. It's a longer video. It's an hour 23, but you can think of it as three smaller videos, and you can only watch the topics that you're interested in, if that makes sense for you. But I watched the whole thing. It's really excellent. So go check it out. The link will be in the show notes. All right, that's all from my side.
That is perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I think now I can share. I would love to share one article with you. And go ahead and share my screen. So this is an article written by, oh, sorry, Dima, I'll minimize you. Written by Guy Baker. And this is a person who is super passionate about accessibility. And he has an article on how to make accessible features in your WinForms application. And here he basically walks through the entire process of building the app and enabling all accessibility features. But another great thing, he's comparing this experience of building it in WinForms with experience on WPF. So there is another article, how to build a WPF app that is accessible. And it talks about all the, let me go, resizing, height contrast theme, and so on. So I would highly recommend checking it out. And he is very passionate about this topic. So if you're curious about any accessibility scenarios, he would be willing to talk to you to address your comments. If you have any requests, what other accessibility features you would like to see implemented, he will be very open for feedback and requests for new demos, apps, and so on. So engage with this person. He's amazing, and big thanks to him for making this content for WinForms and WPF. And I think let me stop. Now I will stop sharing my screen. And at the end, I wanted to talk about our open source contributors, right? So we received so much help from open source community, and we're infinitely thankful for that. And just a few people I wanted to mention that contributed to WinForms repository. These are Hugh Bellamy, who created so many tests and tweaks and fixes, and I've never seen so many PRs from one person in my entire life. Tobias Kaz, he helped triaging incoming issues and reviewing pull requests, and my team said that this person has such a great understanding of all the internal architecture that sometimes they feel he understands it much better than the people who wrote it. And another person is, of course, Konstantin Preiser, who we already talked about, who created a task dialog feature and added a new feature into WinForms after a very long time of not updating this platform. Also, we have a contributor. There is no name or last name. His GitHub handle says gpetro, and he or she is helping with cleanups and enhancement and persistently contributing to WinForms platform. So big thank you for that. Do you, Dmitry, have anyone in your mind who you would like to say thank you? Like another,
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian Lagunas has been helping us a lot of things. He's been working on Prism, of course, for the longest time, but also helping us on other projects as well. So big thank you to Brian. He's in our email threads almost every week, and he's always helping with something. So a huge contributor to our community.
Yes, big thanks to Brian. I just wanted to say that if you guys are creating PRs or feature requests, I can speak especially for WinForms repository, and you don't see enough feedback, that's because we are overwhelmed with the designer right now because we want to make sure it is there. We're trying to get it as soon as possible out. But once we're done with it, you will see a lot more feedback and movement in our WinForms repository in terms of accepting PRs, reviewing features, and so on. So don't think we ignore that. We don't. We read. We are super grateful for everything that you do, and we will do way more in this area once we're done with the designer.
Totally.
Yes. So help us make the future of WinForms and WPF. It's all open source and it's all our mutual community efforts. So participate in the future of those technologies if you're passionate about them. All right.
Definitely.
Do we have any questions? Let me.
All right. Well, I think that's all that I can see. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. I think that's all the content we had, right, Arya?
Yes, I think that's it. So if we don't have any more questions, let's wait. 1, 2, 3. I think we don't. And thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we'll see you in a month or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
See you next time.
Have
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
day, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.